Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Rob Kaiser. I'm the publisher of Greater Wilmington Business Journal. Thank you for joining this session. So we have had a few different sessions already yesterday relating to our technology community. We started off with the big story this year for our region of nCino going public. We had Pierre Naudé as our keynote. It's nice having a $7 billion publicly traded tech company in our region now. But there's been a lot of success stories recently and a lot of new developments happening. So we wanted to jump into a discussion with three folks that have really been central to a lot of the things that are happening in our community. So I wanted to welcome Todd John, Trace Smith, and Jennifer Turnage. So thank you all for being a part of this. So I'm going to kick it off to ask each of them to introduce themselves and their organizations and what they've been working on. And then I'll jump into some questions about our area and building our tech community. And then please submit, if you're attending and you have any questions, please submit them in the chat. And we will try to pull some of you into our little discussion room here so you can be a part of the conversation and ask your questions directly to the panelists. So as I'm looking at my headshots in the Greater Wilmington Business Journal, Todd John, your headshot is first. So I'm going to hand it over to you first to tell us a little bit about yourself and PlayerSpace.
Lucky me. So I'm the founder of PlayerSpace. I started it, well, I say the inspiration for it came in, I think, 2005, and brought a product to market in late 2009 with our first paying customer, and then had, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 customers that year. And then in 2012, it became a full-time job. And so really from 2012 to today is what is the majority of my time has been allocated to. We were fortunate to build it to a point where it got a lot of attention from the mergers and acquisitions world and the private equity world, and ended up selling the business in January of this year. And so that was a great day. And since that time, I have been working for the company that acquired us in several different roles, primarily though overseeing PlayerSpace still. PlayerSpace, I'll just give you a quick definition of it, and then pass it on. So PlayerSpace started off as a sports management online system, cloud-based software as a service. Whereas anything that you would want to do with an amateur, adult, or youth sports organization, anything from registering for an event all the way through the scheduling to group management, player rosters, game scheduling, and tournament brackets. But then we grew that into what we considered a program management platform. So anything that had to do with any kind of program that a municipality or YMCA would run. So it could be childcare, after-school programs, swim lessons, gymnastics lessons, and so we customized the platform throughout the years to meet the needs of those niche applications. Like I said, it was a great ride. It's still a good ride, and fortunate enough to have sold it in January.
Great. Jennifer, you go next.
Yes, thank you. This is great to be here today. So I began my career with PricewaterhouseCoopers and really specialized on financial audits of the technology space, mainly software companies. Then went on to become the CFO of several software companies, multiple exits of different types, and moved from the Triangle down here to Wilmington about 5 years ago, and have been involved in the local tech community there. And speaking today more from the perspective of xElle Ventures, which is an angel investment group that I was a part of founding about 1 year ago, just finished our 1 year anniversary. And we are focused on, we are women investors and we're investing in women-led companies, focused initially here in North Carolina.
Great. Trace?
Yeah, thanks, Rob, and thanks for having us all on today. Todd, congrats on getting your deal done in January. We waited till March, and that was like landing an airplane in a tornado. So congrats on beating us to the altar by 2 months.
Congrats to you as well.
But yeah, Rob, so my name is Trace Smith. I'm the CEO of nextGlass. My background, like Jennifer, kind of career switch from finance. So right out of school, worked in investment banking. And in that role, worked with Kurt Taylor. Everyone will know the Taylor family that's on this call. So Kurt and I worked together in investment banking. I went off and worked for a private equity firm that had offices in Charlottesville and New York. And Kurt called me, I think it was early 2013, and said, hey, I've started a business. We feel like there's an opportunity to build software in the alcohol space because of the 3-tier system in the alcohol space, separating producers, wholesalers, and retailers. The software between and among the tiers is not very good. It looks like it was built in the 80s because it generally was built in the 80s. And so Kurt felt like there was an opportunity to disrupt the existing software landscape. So we raised $1, got going in November of 2013. That's when I joined the team. And we acquired Untappd in December of 2015. I think that's what most people know us for. The Untappd app was the largest beer rating and review site and application in the world at that time. We've grown it significantly since then and leveraged that brand to sell B2B menu publishing software to bars, restaurants, breweries, and bottle shops. So entering COVID, it's been an interesting time for our end market, but pre-COVID, we had about 19,000 customers in 75 countries that use our software to publish their beer menus, and obviously got our deal done with Providence Strategic Growth in March, and have built out a management team and begun to invest in growth, and are really excited for the future and all that'll bring with it for Wilmington and for the rest of the state.
Great, thank you. So let's kind of, before we start talking about Wilmington, let's give everybody a perspective on where you came from. In terms of how long have you either been in Wilmington or been tied to Wilmington, and where you were from originally. I think that'll help frame whenever we're talking about your perspectives on Wilmington. I think it's always good to know where people came from. So Todd, you want to start us off?
Sure, of course. I've been in Wilmington.
I can hear, Todd, I can hear your Southern accent. So.
It's I'm gonna have, so Rob, you just got me off my track, so I'm gonna have to take back and actually just to let you know where that accent comes from. I was at a Starbucks the other day, and somebody asked me how long I'd been in Wilmington, and I said almost 17 years. They said, well, you sound like you're from Pittsburgh. And I said, I am. So it's really kind of a southeastern or southwestern Pennsylvania accent. It's a very distinct one. So I grew up near Pittsburgh, son of a high school basketball coach. And that's really was the main inspiration for PlayerSpace. I built my career in the Washington, D.C. and New York City area, where I had a bookbinding and publishing company that I started when I was 25 and sold when I was 30, and then went to work at AOL pre-Time Warner merger, and that's where I really learned a lot about how to look at things globally and really how to fit into a specific global market within different industry segments. So that was a really cool experience. And that's where I met my wife. That's where we had all 4 kids. And then right after our youngest was born, we moved to Wilmington. And I always tell people that the day we moved to Wilmington was great. And every day after that was better. It was just been, it turned into home. It's just been a fabulous experience. the support and the positive energy around the entrepreneurial ecosystem, particularly the support from the Business Journal and the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, UNCW, and just the local entrepreneur and business community at large is really a huge reason why PlayerSpace was as successful as it was. And that is what I can say that without 1% of 1% of reservation.
Right. Jennifer, give a little on your background.
Happy to. So I grew up in Winston-Salem. I am a North Carolina native, went to Western Carolina University, and then ended up in the Triangle really to begin my career. I was there probably, gosh, all but 2 years kind of that part of my career. I did go overseas to London, was based in London for a couple of years, setting up international operations for Channel Advisor. And I always say that was a very influential time kind of in my development, because I went from being the CFO to being the customer of the CFO. And that changed my perspective on that role and financial reporting and financial management of businesses. And during that time, I was fortunate enough to be able to get a second home on Topsail Island. And so I spent about, 15 years kind of doing the Friday afternoon trek down 40 East and the Sunday night trek back in. My kids were in school in the Triangle. That's where I was working. And then finally 5 years ago, I was making the trek one Monday morning, and it struck me that I was going the wrong way. It was time to flip life. My kids were out of the nest at that point, and decided it was time to turn it around. So ended up with a full-time home here, kept an apartment in Durham for about a year, and then finally gave that up. So most of my time is in North Carolina. The accent has been trained out of me somewhat. It will come out at times, but been fortunate enough to spend some time outside the Triangle as well.
Good. Trace?
Yeah, like Jennifer, I'm a North Carolina native. I grew up in Burlington, so kind of central part of the state between Greensboro and Chapel Hill, and went to Wake Forest, and then after school worked in banking in Charlotte. Made the mistake of leaving the state to go to Virginia for my private equity stint. Lived in Charlottesville, and actually I think Charlottesville is a really good model for what tech in the Southeast can become. But my wife is from Charlotte, so we moved back here in 2015. So shortly after Next Class was beginning to get some traction, and like Jennifer, I burned the road up back and forth between Wilmington and Charlotte for the last 5 years. If you ask my wife, she'd tell you that my second home is the Hampton Inn on Grace Street. So less so during COVID. That's been interesting with the office on Front Street that we maintain closed. But I would echo everything Todd said. I mean, my exposure to Wilmington prior to Next Class was taking field trips to the battleship as a grade school kid. And that was about it. And then when we started Next Class, it was very humbled by the support that we receive locally. Folks like Jim Roberts that really championed our cause and effort, and supported and cheerled us along the way. And so I would echo everything Todd said. It's been phenomenal to have a home in Wilmington.
So let's jump into now that we kind of know your backgrounds, where you came from, what and several of you have kind of mentioned the strengths of our area in terms of being able to grow technology companies here. So we can touch on, if you want to say some other positives, but the part of this is also to talk about what, how do we grow? How do we get more folks like you, more organizations like the ones you all are running in our region? So what do you think are kind of the next steps for our area? What would you like to see for us to become an even more thriving technology community?
Is that going to start with me again, Rob?
Yeah, you can all, but feel free to interrupt them.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't have any. I didn't have anything. I didn't know if I was up, or if anybody had something else that they feel inspired to say. I absolutely would pass on.
Yeah, no, you're good. You start, Todd.
Sure. I look back to, I had, like I said, I had my own bookbinding and publishing company, but I started that when I was 25 and I didn't know what I was doing. So when I sold it, I didn't get rich or anything like that. It was a decent deal, but that was about it. So PlayerSpace, entering into the enterprise software world, that was a whole new ball game for me. Like I didn't know anything about capital strategy. I didn't know anything about, or very little about capital strategy, very little about investment, very little about, okay, here are some of the different stages that you're going to go through, some of the things. Here's where the market may be going. Like as an entrepreneur, like in especially when you're doing something that is either for the first time or has a really unique, innovative spin on it that you specifically kind of felt inside, there's only so much roadmap that can be given to you, because it kind of has the potential to hinder your creativity and kind of cloud the vision that you might have had originally for it. So, but with that said, there are certainly things that I think the community could adopt and provide as support to folks that are getting started, or to help foster existing entrepreneurial spirit and endeavors, such as, okay, look, from a capital strategy perspective, here are some of the things that you're going to come across, right? That you regardless of what kind of business you are in, you're going to see these types of challenges, and here's how others have gone about satisfying those needs and really mitigating future risks, and at the same time protecting not just the entrepreneur. That's not really where I'm going with it, as much as it is protecting the purity of the business. I think, those are some things that would have been helpful to me. And it's not like anybody was hiding that information. It was just that it wasn't really known to address, right? Like Trace said, you've got like absolutely wonderful people like Jim Roberts, right? Like Jim would have given the shirt off his back to help us, but there was like just certain things that, might not have been, understood, that, okay, here's where the help's needed, because I didn't know what I didn't know, so therefore didn't know what to ask. So that would be one thing that I think would be helpful to really helping the tech community. I think the other thing is, because tech specifically is such a dynamic environment, and you can really easily get caught up in the next shiny object, some infrastructural research on specific trends that look like, okay, look, this is, regardless of what your vision is, use these as data points as where certain market segments may be going. So that kind of cultivation, that kind of nurturing and environment, doing that in somewhat of a nurturing environment, I think would also be helpful.
Good. Jennifer or Trace?
I'm happy to jump in. I think that Wilmington in our area has a tremendous foundation for the tech community and entrepreneurs in general. And by that, I mean, we have that community. We have Jim's groups and New, and we have CIE and Tech Mountain, and now Genesis Block. We have ways to bring people together with kind of the other entrepreneurs and the other tech people, which is really important. But we also have a good mix of tech companies. And we have the more established companies like PPD, then we have Live Oak, nCino, Aperture. We have PlayerSpace, NextGlass. We have EasyVote, and then we also have kind of the startups, and even things like Opiate, which is had some great coverage as well. So we have that community here. We have the experience. We have the companies. Capital is difficult. I'd say capital is difficult wherever you go, but as we see exits, we are going to see capital. That may take, in the sense of an IPO, it may take years before that capital is liquid and reinvested. If it's a cash sale, it may be available then, as long as, if a company is acquired, you're generally still working there. It may be a couple of years before that gets recycled. And we have to allow some time for that to happen. But I think where we have a tremendous advantage right now, and we look at opportunities, in the world today, many of us are here because of the quality of life. We chose to live here. When I look at friends of mine in the Triangle and what we've gone through in the last 6 months, many of them said, now that I can work anywhere, I want to work at the beach. And they did. And, the world that we work in and is going to change in the future. We don't know what it is, but more and more people are learning how to work virtually and choose where they want to live and work from there. So that gives us, I think, a really, really strong advantage in really bringing that talent to this area, keeping that talent here, both in terms of knowledge and capital and mentorship, and also helps our overall economy. And once we can get to job creation, that benefits everyone. And that's always something that is kind of important to me personally, is as we grow these companies, as we grow wealth, are we also creating good jobs for people who want to live in this area or want to come to this area or want to go to school here and stay here?
I think,
Trace?
I think Jennifer hit two nails right on the head. So one are exits. You just have to have access to capital. And frankly, it's difficult to attract, especially early stage capital from outside of North Carolina. Quick story on that in a second. And so I do think, it's not necessarily liquid, but when there are exit events for companies that have grown and scaled, and you get a couple overnight millionaires that made their money in tech and have maybe a little more risk tolerance than folks from traditional industries, they're going to be more willing to strike a $50,000 or $100,000 annual investment check and take that risk. And so I think you have to have that. I think the second thing Jennifer really hit on that's totally right is talent. And I think that COVID, look, in some ways the world's going to go back to looking the way it did pre-COVID, but in some ways it's going to change. And I think one way that I've already seen it change, I mentioned I went to Wake, my wife went to Chapel Hill, and the sort of reverse brain drain is on. I mean, the number of our friends who left North Carolina, went to New York, went to Boston, went to San Francisco, went to DC, and just said, enough. I'm coming back. I'm going to move back now. It's going to help, right? Because those are folks like Kurt, who left Wilmington, picked up a skill set elsewhere, brought those skills back. Jennifer, you mentioned your career and going to London and bringing those skills back to Wilmington. I think you just need more of that. People that are familiar with the landscape and kind of know how the game is played. One of my favorite sayings is the first rule of the game is knowing you're in one, and you're definitely in one, building a tech startup. And I think, folks that understand those rules and can come back will help. Now, I think probably unlike Todd, my background was in capital markets. And so I knew kind of what the landscape looked like to some degree, but if you've got a 10 or 15 or $20 million EBITDA business, private equity firms, they don't care if you're located on Mars, right? If they can pencil out a return, they're going to strike you a check. But seed stage and Series A investing is very different. I mean, we went out very early on in the Next Class story and met with leading VC firms in the Bay Area and in Los Angeles. And I'll never forget Mark Suster, who's become a friend and mentor at Upfront Ventures in Los Angeles. He said, look, I'm going to tell you now, it's great that you're coming out and getting these reps, but you're wasting your time because you're not a repeat entrepreneur. And no one in LA and San Francisco is going to get on a plane 4 times a year and come to a board meeting in North Carolina for $1.5 million or $2 million board check, seed check. It's just not, the opportunity cost is just too high. We've got so much deal flow in our own backyard. We're just not going to come out there. And if you're a repeat entrepreneur and you have those relationships and they don't feel like they have to get on a plane and check in on you 4 times a year, that's okay. Or if you have a little traction and you get to kind of the stage we were at with Next Class, they will come in, but it's very hard really early on to attract capital from outside of the state. And that's why I think, to Jennifer's point, you just have to have access. So there's that infusion or access to capital locally.
Great. So again, if you're an attendee, please put any questions you have in the chat area. So what we had a discussion yesterday on angel investing and some of the topics we just touched on here, which is obviously a big need for any tech community, is to have those initial dollars and experience to help companies get going. Probably one of the unique things we have on this call is representatives from 2 companies that started here and recently had a successful exit. So let's talk about the other end of that process. When you get to the exit, if you could both talk a little bit about that experience, how did you consciously make a decision? Okay, now's the time to do it, and here's the process I'm going to follow. Was it just, the phone rang and the price was high enough? Or so kind of take us through, your thinking as it got close to the exit and how you approached that.
Todd, I'll let you off the hook here. I'll go first and let you be on deck.
And then Todd can also talk about how he anticipated COVID and sold in January too.
Yeah. So I'll tell you how not to do it first by trying to get it done in March. So, so for us, we had grown to double digits millions ARR. So we were on the radar of most growth equity funds, and you get on those Inc. lists, and I think they're essentially vanity. They're really good for recruiting and employee morale, and also getting 23-year-old and 24-year-old kids fresh out of Ivy League schools to call you and put you in their CRM at growth equity firms. So we get put on those lists, and we get the phone calls, and I take the calls and chat with them, and you can tell pretty quickly who's interested and who's not by does a partner get on a plane and come to meet you? And we had several firms from Boston, New York, the Bay Area fly out to Wilmington to come meet with us, kind of maybe starting in 2016, 2017 and on, really as we started to scale. And over the course of 2019, we began to attract some interest from strategic buyers. So, companies either in our space or kind of in the social media space. And as Kurt and I talked about it entering 2020, we just didn't feel that was the right outcome for the business. We weren't confident that those companies would let us, maintain a presence in Wilmington. We didn't think that was right for our employees or for the local community. And so we said, okay, how do we achieve an outcome that makes sense, but also does right by our, shareholders or employee base and the future that we want to build with this company? And so with all those inbound growth equity leads, I kind of parsed through them and said, okay, here are kind of the top 10 firms that I think in terms of fit and likelihood to get a deal done, it makes sense, and went out at the end of January and beginning of February and did a 3-city, 2-week roadshow and went and met with them. And, I would say maybe 3/4 of them had already met the partners and been in touch and shared materials. And the others, it was kind of an introductory meeting, but felt like it made a lot of sense. And in our case, Providence Strategic Growth in Boston actually front ran the deal. So they got in front of all the other firms and said, we want to do this. What do we need to do in order to get it done? And said, you need to fly down to North Carolina and sit down with me and Kurt and figure this out. And so we got our term sheet signed in mid-February, actually on Valentine's Day. We were engaged on Valentine's Day to be married originally at the end of March. And then I'll never forget sitting in my living room the night the NBA season got postponed, and then all the other sports seemed to kind of domino behind it, postponing their seasons, thinking, this is going to be tough to get done. This may not get done in this environment. And I think it's a huge testament to Providence Strategic Growth and their word and resolve as an investor to hang in there with us and get this done. And so we closed it at the end of March, and they've been incredibly supportive. PSG, half the firm are investing professionals and half are ops professionals. So they really helped us think about growth, and this is what they do. They invest in high growth companies that have real traction and good unit level economics, and just help you pour fuel on the fire. So that's our story. I think probably the biggest lesson is you don't raise money from a dead standstill. Investors, they tend to invest in lines, not dots. And you've got to kind of put dots on their map so that they can trace that line over time, constantly checking in with them, maybe every 6 months, sending an update. Hey, here's what we said we were going to do. Here's what we did. They like to see that traction. And so, I would say to anyone trying to do it, I wouldn't start from a dead standstill and go cold. Try to build those relationships over time, because it's very much a relationship business. So Todd,
Good.
tell me how it's done. How do you get it done before a pandemic?
Well, Trace, I'm listening to you talk, and I'm like, maybe there's one person in Wilmington that wasn't supportive, and it would be you. I was like, I didn't know that these 24, 25-year-old recent Ivy League grads, I thought I was special when they called me. I didn't know they were just putting me in their CRM. You withheld that info.
You can hear them typing generally.
It's so funny, because that was my experience. Like, we started to get those calls maybe 5 years ago, and I was a good bit naive. Providence was one of those companies, but we were relatively careful what we said and what we didn't say, and all that. So it was an interesting dance. But it was about 5 years ago where things got pretty hot. I think when I had the inspiration for PlayerSpace, the industry didn't exist, right? Like, so if you were to say like sports and program management software for the municipality and recreational industry, it didn't exist. So the first few years was an education process. We're trying to educate customers of, okay, you need this. And then in 2013, after a handful of us, started, well, I mean, I'd say, companies like ours just started to spring up like flowers in the springtime, just all over the place. And there were a lot of them didn't make it. And then there was, in 2013, Dick's Sporting Goods bought our biggest competitor and decided to give away that product for free just to get the data to sell them sporting goods. And I thought we were going out of business. I didn't think, how are we going to compete with Dick's? I mean, but it got pretty hot. The whole market segment got really hot around that time. And when you talk about, I got to tell the story just because it has to do with Wilmington and just how strong the community is. Just a friend of mine who had a search firm, has a search firm in Wilmington. His name's Rob Hawthorne. He was like, TJ, look, I got this client in Texas that, I've been doing some work for, and they were talking about doing something. They were talking about just getting into the business that you're in. Would you talk to them? And I was like, yeah, I'll talk to them, because either they got real deep pockets, so they might be a potential acquirer. Well, it was Jerry Jones, the owner of the Cowboys, and one of Jerry's partners on another venture. So I met with them, and they looked at buying us. This was in like 2015. So like I said, it really got heated up about 5 years ago. And Jerry went to Providence. Again, this was completely independent of the conversations that I had with Providence before. And they put together a big fund and went on an acquisition spree and just bought every other competitor that had a decent business model of ours. Ended up buying like 29 companies over a 24, 25-month period. And we were not one of them. And it was because we just kept growing. I was, when I say, I incubated PlayerSpace on the side for that time period. We got a scalable business model, and I was hired to be the president COO of another tech firm out of Greensboro to help scale that. So, and the gentleman, Randall Kaplan, who put all the money behind that, had one of the more wealthy guys in the state, and he had sold their business to Eco Labs, and I learned a lot from him. And he's like, when you start to get into that place where you feel like, all right, we got something special, and that you're getting those inquiries about acquisition, what you really got to do, as uncomfortable it is you got to say, what, look, I'm gonna have to really become competitors with those, like increase the level of intensity of competition among the potential acquirers, right? So we started to do that. Another thing he said was, stay focused on your core business, but also make sure that you're looking at different market segments, because you don't know which one of those is going to actually pull you into that serious acquisition mode. So, and we did those things. Those are just things that I learned over time. So we fielded those calls over that 5-year period or so, 15 to 19. And we got to the point where it was like, all right, we're competing with some of our partners, or we're starting to compete with some of our partners in a way that isn't cute to them anymore. And because they were big PE backed organizations or even publicly traded companies. And they're like, all right, look, this isn't, like I said, this isn't cute anymore. And I knew that once we got to that point, it was, all right, we're either going to have to go and do a big raise, or it's time to sell. And I was leaning towards selling, it was like, I was leaning towards wanting to do that anyway. So fortunately, like I said, we started the conversations, the serious acquisition conversations with one of our partners who was PE backed GI partners out of San Francisco. And they, we got to a place verbally and from a relationship, when you talk about relationships, it's all about relationships. Like you gotta be likable. You gotta build those relationships. And when we got to the point where we're like, oh yeah, we really like each other. We feel comfortable. Let's get serious. And that's when we stopped all the conversations with everybody else, went down the exclusive path with them. And that whole process, I would say, started in July of 2019. And we put the foot on the gas and got it closed in January of this year.
That's great. Thank you.
I think that, Todd and Trace, what you've said in your experiences remind me that, what I saw, it started about 7 or 8 years ago, was that private equity kind of became a viable exit or liquidity option for tech companies. Until that, you were either looking to be acquired, by a strategic partner, a competitor, or looking for an IPO. It's almost one of those two options. And then as we started to get more and more mature companies that maybe were positive cash flow, profitable, had metrics that showed scalability, private equity became interested. And there are different valuation metrics that we kind of have to learn and adjust to, but it does give you a way to possibly have more competition in your exit. Because it is a financial decision, but it comes with the funding to take the company to a whole different level. Often there's some immediate liquidity and possible long-term jobs will stay where they are and even have the budget for more hiring. So I think that's been a very interesting trend, is starting to see more private equity activity in the tech space. And then that also can lead to multiple exits for the same group of founders and employees within the same company at higher and higher valuations.
Thank you. So we have a question from Laura Brogdon Primavera. If probably most of you on this call know her already, she has been at the CIE for a long time. And if you ever have any doubts about her devotion to our tech community and entrepreneurship, she had a baby last night at 8 o'clock, and she is live on the call this morning. and asking questions. So I think you all are very obligated to answer her questions right now. So 2 questions. First one's for Jennifer. If you could give an update on how xElle Ventures is going, and any program plans to help educate young women on how to invest wisely.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, congratulations, Laura. This is exciting. Can't wait to see some pictures, and appreciate your support of xElle. So we formed, it was last August, so really just 1 year ago. So we had only had a few kind of monthly membership meetings before our in-person model totally fell apart. So we spent a few months and basically, like everyone else, we switched our meeting format to Zoom. Learned how to engage people virtually. We have seen probably, I would say, a decrease in deal flow, but good quality of deals. So we haven't made an announcement yet, but you should hear something very soon about our first investment. And I will put out, I'm calling it an investment, but we do have a little different model. So we have a debt model. And so we are funding, it's more early stage companies. We may be first round, early portion of outside capital, loans up to $100,000 that are repaid over a 2 to 3 year period. So it is a debt model. So we're looking at businesses that have a product, that have customers, and have the ability to repay. So a little different model than some typical angel investing, VC type of investing. And we are working on a program that's going to bring together local entrepreneurs throughout the state to do some pitches for us. But Laura, it's a good point. What we have seen is, particularly with women, many of the women involved with xElle and interested in xElle are new to angel investing. So as part of each of our monthly meetings, we kind of have an angel investing 101 topic. So we might talk about how the group was formed. We might talk about due diligence process. We might talk about our screening process, deal structure. So we're providing education to our members as well as providing financial support to other women business owners.
Great, thank you. Laura's next question is for Todd, putting you on the spot. Todd, are you looking to invest and keep the investment love going in Wilmington?
That's a great question, and thanks for it. And obviously, first, thank you for joining today, especially under the circumstances. And congratulations, it's a wonderful moment, and I'm very happy for you. I don't know is the answer, and there is, here's something that. Like you hear different things throughout your life, and for whatever reason, like some of them that are as abstract or out there as or whatever, however you come across it, as crazy as it might be, it just sticks with you, right? And I can't tell you how many years ago I read something on Steven Spielberg that said that he's never financed any of his, he's never funded any of his own movies, because he's a movie producer and a creative person, not an investor or financier. And I don't know if I'm an investor. I mean, I'm an operator. I'm a creative entrepreneur. That's where I thrive. So I don't know that I would definitely seed and angel fund my own new ventures. I have been approached about seed money and angel investing into other businesses, and it's all kind of new to me, right? So it's only been in the last 8-9 months where I've been in that position. So I'm still kind of feeling it out, and I don't know exactly where I'm supposed to land in all of that. But I'm open to it. I'm open to investing and being a part of it. I think that's where my comfort zone might lie. It's staying true to what your talents are and what you're really good at, and understanding what you're not good at, and where your uncomfortableness lies, that you probably shouldn't. There's the old saying, get comfortable with the uncomfortable. But there's also staying true to who you are. So like that's still what I'm balancing.
Well, COVID's been mentioned several times in this discussion and others. I'd like to dive in a little bit to your own organizations and your approaches to manage through this. On one end, you would think technology companies, technology organizations are the best suited ones to get through this. Although I will say I've heard from several technology entrepreneurs how difficult it's been, because I think tech companies also have very unique cultures, and that culture is, especially a startup environment where everyone's kind of jammed into one place together, and a lot of the energy is everybody being in that one space. And even for tech companies, I think that's hard to keep that culture going when everyone's separate. So if you could take us through what your approach has been in your organization or other organizations you've seen, and what lessons have been learned?
I can lead off. So in our case, we closed the office in Wilmington on March 12th and have not reopened it yet. I have some hope with us entering phase 3. There was a time when we thought, oh, it'll be closed for 2 or 3 weeks, and here we are 6 months later, and it's still closed. Like you mentioned, Rob, I mean, tech companies are pretty well equipped to go remote. I mean, all of our product and engineering was already remote. So, head of product in Los Angeles, CTO in Boston. So it was really easy for us to flip that switch. It's, hey, take your monitors. If you want your comfy desk chair, take that too, and we'll see you whenever this is over. We were already doing sales calls, customer support calls, customer success work using Zoom. Everyone was already on Slack. So it was really easy for us to flip the switch and do it. That said, just because it was easy to do it doesn't mean it's been easy to live through it. I saw Reed Hastings at Netflix say that he sees essentially no positives from remote work, and I agree. It's been hard culturally. I think, anyone that's been in our office in Wilmington knows that it's an open floor plan. It's a lot of fun. There's dynamic water cooler or sometimes beer tap conversations that happen. And I think in a pretty stressful time for a lot of people, not having those face-to-face conversations has not been productive. Obviously it's been good that we're not contributing to the spread of the virus, or that folks have had more family time at home. I'm speaking about work specifically. I see basically no benefit. I think it's we're worse off for it. I look forward to the day that we can all get together again. But we've tried to do some things like happy hours and games and hangouts and that type of thing. But I think what's hard is, if you're like me, you're on Zoom calls all day from dusk till dawn, and from dawn till dusk, and it doesn't end. And so at the end of the day, when someone set up a Zoom call for a happy hour on Friday, the last thing I want to do is another Zoom call. And we've got people who are introverted and who are hating all this, and we have people who are extroverted and want more of it. I think what we've told the team is, to each his or her own. You need to do what you're comfortable with. This is a tough time for everyone, and so we're not forcing or compelling anyone to participate in things, but we're very open to letting folks, set those things up and interface with their teammates.
Good.
I've been working with kind of several companies, different companies during this time period. And, personally, I've not been back in an office or in an in-person business meeting since March. And definitely seeing what Trace has described is that even though you're a tech company and you may be able to do your work remotely from a laptop, does not mean you're as effective as you are in the office. And it's because you're missing that collaboration, kind of that creativity, those discussions that happen. I think combining trying to work from home with trying to homeschool children, it's just devastating to a lot of people in terms of their time and trying to figure out, how do I meet both of these obligations? How do I provide for my family with both of these things weighing on me? And so you have to find ways to be creative to meet individual needs, but still being fair to everyone. The uncertainty of the schedule day to day is difficult. Like again, where Trace said, we thought this was go home for 2 to 3 weeks. Now I've seen more guidance and people just saying, just let me know what I'm dealing with. So one of the companies I'm working with has just said, no one will return to the office this year. Make your plans, do what you need to do with your home office and childcare arrangements with that assumption. We have another company here that's local where we started bringing people back into the office, rotating through maybe departments or members of the leadership team, starting to try to see what that looks like for us. But when it comes to, tech companies, even though the product may be working fine, people may be able to do their jobs, we're affected by what's happening to our customers. So when our customers' businesses are shut down, if they lose their funding, if they're delaying orders, then we have to respond to that. And that's where the tech businesses will suffer.
Todd?
I'm not loving it, and it's and there's like Trey said, you've got folks that are more introverted and folks that are more extroverted. So there's different there's different feelings and different productivity levels, but like Jennifer said, there's a missing collaboration that just results in decreased creativity and productivity. And I'm anxious to see that come again. Like Jennifer and Trace, we haven't had our office open since mid-March, and we the same thought it was going to be a few weeks, and here we are. And the company that bought us is nobody's going back to the offices this year, so it's tough. It's tough, and especially on the PlayerSpace specific side of the business. We're a program management software as a service company, and the programs that we help run more efficiently and effectively through our software are youth sports programs, adult sports programs, swim lessons. I mean, like those did not happen for months, and they're only now starting to happen again. So both from what I would say a product enhancement perspective, although we have been able to do some things, I do think that in-person collaboration that has been absent results in a less or limited ability to really hone in on building software that does what it's supposed to do, which is mimic the human experience so that you can create efficiencies. And it's just it's tough. It's tough. And so that's on the productivity side. But then on the actual business side of it, there's not nearly as many people participating in programs. And also, like Jennifer said, a big part of our business grew into the after-school programs, right? And because the YMCA market was a big niche for us, and the YMCA's run a lot of after-school programs. So I mean, like we're hearing just not just the horror stories on the sides of our customers who can't run the after-school programs nearly the way they shut them down for a while, and then now they have them, but they're at limited capacity. And the parents that are saying, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Because either they have to go back to work or they can't go back to work, and they need the help at home, especially among lower income families. It's a lot of it's heartbreaking. And I as you can tell, I can get pretty serious about this piece of the conversation, because we feel it. We feel it every day. So, hopefully we'll get back to, what Trace said, even though we're probably going to have a different world going forward, it can likely resemble enough of what the world looked like before. And hopefully we can get to that pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, we got time for one more quick question. Got a question from Zach Nichols. What advice does the panel have to capture investors' attention when you're just starting a business? I think maybe Jennifer, as a investor, maybe has to answer that one first.
Yeah, I think that when you're just starting a business, think about investors as new relationships you want to form. These are going to be relationships you build over time. So part of it is educating them, respecting their time, just getting them interested in what you're doing. And then the more you can tell them what you're going to do and then follow up and say 3 or 6 months and tell them that you actually did that, that will build credibility. And maybe if you ask them for one piece of advice and follow up on how you use that advice. So maybe your advice is that was interesting. I looked into it. I didn't take your advice. that shows that you're an independent thinker. But it could be that, oh, that was a great idea. We tried this, we learned this, and refined to this. So if you show the investor that you are interested in what they have to say and that you're actually listening to it and processing it, and then start to build a relationship where you show them that you do what you say you're going to do, or you explain why you didn't do it, then that'll start to build that relationship over time.
Yeah, I would say, I see a lot of decks from entrepreneurs that want help in kind of shaping up materials or want me to take a look at investing. I think it's important to note that a lot of these early stage venture funds, they're looking at 600-700 decks to do one deal, right? I mean, the hit rate's really low, so you can't take offense and take things personally. I think, Jennifer alluded to this, like it's a learning experience. Like take the advice, synthesize it. You're going to get different opinions from different people. So I think you can use it as a learning opportunity. But in looking at decks, like I think if an investor can't, within like 4 or 5 slides, understand what you're doing and what your ask is, they're going to tune out. They don't want 15 pages of fluff up front on how great your team is and all these things. Like, they'll make that assessment. So I think, what's the ask? What are you raising? What are the terms? And, what are you building in very concrete terms? It's great to have a vision and a mission, but if you can't describe it, in terms of like unit level economics or what your monetization strategy is or what traction you have, I think folks start to get a little bit dubious of the story if there's really no substance to that story. So just get it out there quickly so that it lands and the investors take a serious look at it.
Yeah, it's the best advice that was given to me was just make money. If you're making money, the things that Trace just said kind of happen a lot easier. It's real. If you're making money, it's real easy to jot down why you're making money. Here's the problem that existed. Here was my solution, and here's how I made some money on it. That it really is that simple, and keeping it that simple. And because like Jennifer said, when you're talking about relationships, what's at the core of a relationship is the value that you bring to it. And that's what the value that investors want to see is cash. I mean, like they want to see, okay, what's my return going to be? What's my money going to be? How, and why is that predictable? So it's somebody told me just make money, and I will be the first to say I did it incorrectly, right? Like we had my first investor deck is embarrassing. Like it's embarrassing. It didn't make any sense. We're talking about a market that didn't exist in a hypothetical. Here are all of our different revenue streams, and they were in the billions. It's okay. That's not the way to go about it. I know that because I did it that way. It's just, make some money, show how you make, show the problem, show the solution, and then how that scales out. I know that's very simple, but when I was stuck and somebody told me to do that, I did it, and then life got easier. So.
Right.
I would reinforce what Todd said. Often I'll talk to an early stage investor, and like I said, if you need money, revenue from customers is your best source of money. It's the best cash flow you can get. And, if you're just starting out, go sell your product or your service to someone you don't know and get them to pay you. That will have more credibility with an investor. If you say, I have one customer, now I want to go get 10, 100, 1,000. That will show them that you've taken that risk and made some progress. And back to Todd's point, it does come down to cash flow in the end.
Great. Well, we are out of time, so I'd like to thank all of our panelists and all of our attendees for coming. So we have our seminars will kick off at 11 o'clock, and then we have our roundtables at 12:30. So I hope to see a lot of you on those. And thanks again for being a part of the Expo.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.